Washington Journal continues.
Lanny Davis joining us this morning, former White House special counsel and longtime friend and associate of both Bill and Hillary Clinton, currently executive vice president at Levitt Communications. Lanny Davis with us this morning to talk about some of the discussions lately about the Clinton finances, the Clinton Foundation, and of course the use of Hillary's use of her personal email server in her times as Secretary of State. Tell us about your relationship, how far it goes back with Bill and Hillary.
Well, I first met Hillary, whose last name was Rodham, when I was a senior at Yale Law School and she was a freshman. And within about 10 minutes of standing on line to register, the first question she asked me is, where's the nearest legal services clinic to volunteer? And I said, what? You're at Yale Law School? You ought to be asking me what courses, how to study. Are you really interested in volunteering? It tells you a lot about who Hillary, then Rodham, now Clinton, is and what her commitment to public service is all about. I met Bill Clinton shortly thereafter because he was a volunteer in the then Joe Lieberman for State Senate campaign before Joe Lieberman became a U.S. Senator. So we all go back to something in the drinking water in New Haven at Yale in those days.
What's your current relationship with either Bill or Hillary Clinton?
I'm still a friend. I'm not part of their campaign. I'm not on anybody's payroll. I have no title. I'm a lawyer, and I'm a friend of both Clintons.
Well, a headline here in the Buffalo News reflects sets the scene for, I guess, our discussion. Enormous infusions of foreign cash bring renewed questions about Clinton ethics, and they're talking about the foreign cash coming into the Clinton Foundation. If you were still an advisor to Bill or Hillary Clinton, how would you view what they've done so far in terms of their reaction to some of the news about the foundation? And two, how would you advise them going forward?
Well, first of all, the answer that they have chosen, which I agree with, is transparency. And there have been some inadvertent errors, but so minor compared to the total of transparently disclosed contributions. For example, they do not take any anonymous donations, unusual for nonprofits. And in addition, I look at the good works that very few people have in their headlines. Very few people, even Republicans, deny that because of the Clinton Foundation, there are millions of people in Africa who are no longer suffering from AIDS or being treated. There are thousands of American schools who have preschool programs and special nutrition programs because of the Clinton Foundation. So I could go on, but it's curious to me how something so positive that even the Republicans say the Clinton Foundation has done fantastic work can get twisted into a negative. And the final comment I would make is, let's look at that headline as indicative of everything, including the book that was written, raising questions, innuendo of wrongdoing, even the accusation of bribery, taking money for a policy change at the State Department, is the innuendo suggested, never quite stated, about Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Money to Bill Clinton, money to the foundation in exchange for policy changes at state. Even the author of this book and its publisher said there is no evidence of illegality or anything unethical. That's the publisher. And of course, in my view, there's a difference between innuendo and facts. Well, and I'll talk about facts.
You mentioned transparency, and
yes.
That's the one thing you would, leading up to the publication, and you mentioned the book Clinton Cash, and the stories that have come out in addition to that, in terms of how the foundation is funded, et cetera. Do you think that the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton campaign more broadly has been as transparent as they should be prior to this recent news?
Well, I said there have been inadvertent examples of non-disclosures. Very, very small percentage of the total of $2 billion raised has been inadvertently not disclosed, and those have led to headlines. You can headline a 1% inadvertent or 99% transparency. Let's put it this way, that no one can deny. Their disclosure of foreign nation contributions, which help HIV victims just as much as non-foreign nation contributions, have been transparent with very, very few exceptions, and those were inadvertent.
Lanny Davis is with us here on Washington Journal. We invite you to join the conversation, 202-748-8000 for Democrats 202-748-8001 for Republicans, and for all others, 202-748-8002. Send us a tweet as well if you'd like, at C-SPAN WJ. The book, Clinton Cash by Peter Schweizer. Obviously, one of the reasons we invited you on this morning was to respond to some of the things that Mr. Schweizer has said and written. I wanted to play you some comments that he made on the issue of speaking fees and speaking to in front of foreign entities. Let's take a listen.
The Clintons are unique and fit into this pattern. No post-presidency has been marked by as much money-making as Bill Clinton has engaged in. They took in between 2001 and 2012 some $136 million. That's unprecedented in scale and in scope. But the second thing that I think warrants particular discussion here is they've created a new model. And this model, if it is allowed to continue and it is successful, is going to be adopted by others. And the model is basically getting around rules and laws that we have in place that prevent foreign entities from influencing American politics. If you're a foreign company, you cannot give campaign contributions in American political elections. You can't give to a political action committee. But with the Clinton Foundation and with this ability to pay speaking fees to the spouse of the Secretary of State, foreign entities now have a way of giving money to families of elected officials in the hopes of influencing them. And I think that is a very, very troubling development.
Mr. Davis.
It's very interesting how he phrases things. Let me emphasize and repeat his words, not my words. In the hopes of influencing. At the same time, on Fox Network, a friendly network interview of him by Chris Wallace, he said, I have no facts to prove any wrongdoing or illegality by Hillary Clinton in exchanging money for her husband in fees or to the foundation for any policy changes at state. So he says, raises questions. That's innuendo. And without being too extreme here, when I was raised in the 1950s, I'm showing my age, there was a gentleman named Senator Joseph McCarthy who held up a piece of paper. I have here in my hand 400 people working at the State Department who may be communists. Headlines across the United States. The words may be are no different than Mr. Schweizer, who I give credit for never saying I have a single fact suggesting a speaking fee or a donation is connected to Secretary Clinton's policy decisions. In fact, the ones he cites, there is affirmative, I'll use the uranium mine as an example, there's affirmative facts disproving any connection. The decision to approve that Russian acquisition of a uranium mine was made by 9 different federal agencies, including the State Department representative who on record said, I never had Mrs. Clinton intervene in anything before this board. The Utah Radiation Commission, a pretty conservative red state, approved this transaction. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, completely independent agency, approved this transaction. That disproves that Secretary Clinton had anything to do. She said she didn't, but the proof is she didn't. He doesn't cite those facts. He just says, well, it raises a question that a donation came in 06, the decision was made in 11, and those two may be connected. That's called smoke and innuendo. He admits no facts.
All right, let's hear from our viewers on the issue of the Clinton finances, and our guest, Lanny Davis, joining us here on Washington Journal. Let's go first to Sweet Harbor, Florida, and Mike's on our Republican line. Mike, good morning. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning, C-SPAN. I wasn't prepared to call in today, and then I saw the guest and his rhetoric about Miss Clinton. I think it's funny that he cites when he first was introduced to her in law school that she was looking to go to the to donate her time pro bono, if you will. Juxtapose that with her defense of the child rape victim, and you can go and pull up on YouTube. She's queried about it, and she gives completely contradicting answers as to why. First, she said she did it as a favor, and then she said she was forced to do it. And anyone who really wants to champion her as a feminist icon just needs to pull up the transcripts on how she treated that child in defending a man who raped her.
Do you know of any of what he's talking about?
He's referring to what a lot of public defenders, including myself as a lawyer, people who are not lawyers don't understand our ethical obligation. Everybody deserves a defense. And public defenders, people paid by taxpayers, defend everyone who comes into a criminal court. Volunteers do that. In this case, she was defending somebody who had a right to a defense, might well have been guilty. And this gentleman doesn't like that obligation by lawyers. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't have a judicial system, due process. This viewer has a right to his opinion. Some people don't like having the obligation to defend, but without that, we wouldn't have due process, we wouldn't have jury trials, we would be a dictatorship, and that's the difference between us as a democracy.
Here's Herndon. Virginia John's on our Democrats line. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, my concern was, my basic concern, I don't understand the controversy about the Clintons and the scope of the fact that, I mean, it's being pushed primarily, obviously, by the Republicans. They have reporters, which I understand, but when it's revealed the other day about Rubio being, basically funded, not just funded, but showing a quid pro quo by some billionaire, and the fact that he actually had the gall to say, what's the conflict? I mean, that automatically, I think, should take him out of the race. I mean, there's no question. And it's kind of what I've been seeing with the Republican Party for a long time. They're always putting out the Clintons. They're always talking about hypocrisy and being transparent. Just talking about transparent doesn't make one transparent. And I think the Republican Party, it's just, they're the party of basically, not all, but mostly hypocrites. It's just really disturbing. So just wanted your take.
I'm breaking up there a little bit, John. Any response?
No, I heard John. And John, I thank you for being a Democrat and for being sympathetic to the Clintons, but I'm going to surprise you by saying don't go there. Don't do to the Republicans with the smoke and innuendo that this author and Rush Limbaugh, by the way, recently repeated, and it's been repeated over and over again, that 10% of all foundation donations go to good works, the other 90% to staff and salaries. Pontifact absolutely debunked that as not a true statement. I think Limbaugh used the number 15%. And if you don't believe me as a Democrat, go to Fox News, not exactly a Democratic-leaning network, where that statement was debunked. In fact, the Clinton Foundation is unusual in that it takes in money and it does the projects itself. Mr. Schweizer uses the number only 10% were given as grants to other charities. That's the way most foundations work. They give money to other organizations. The Clinton Foundation is hands-on, on their literally hands and knees planting seeds and staffing African and international projects. So Pontifact has said that at least 80% of all dollars to the foundation go to good works, 88% if you include HIV, and Fox News is one of many who have debunked this, I would now say, false statement bordering on a lie, because it becomes a lie after you know what the facts are and why the foundation, being a hands-on organization, staffs and pays for staff to go to foreign places to literally be on their hands and knees planting seeds and helping HIV victims. So anybody from this point on who hears 10% or 15% foundation, that is false, and the person who's saying it needs to check Pontifact and Fox News, and if they repeat it, then it becomes a lie.
I want to look at the political side of this a bit with Hillary's campaign. Quinnipiac University poll, the headline from that was, "What Trouble Clinton Has Early Lock on Iowa Caucus." Quinnipiac poll finds with the Sanders-Biden only Dems over 3%. How do you think that these stories, Mr. Schweizer's book, are affecting the campaign so far?
Remarkable to destroy a myth that the pundits in Washington and people who write about politics have repeated, sincerely but wrongly. Since the email story, which I would love to address, and this controversy, so-called, about all the good works the Clinton Foundation have done, the New York Times, CBS recent poll, the NBC Wall Street Journal recent poll, all very professionally respected polls, just recently, found that Hillary Clinton's ratings have gone up on issues of national leadership and strength, and she leads every Republican candidate by as large a margin, if not larger, than before these controversies. In other words, all of the loud noise, breathless headlines. In the mainstream media, we're talking New York Times, Washington Post, we're not just talking fringe media, and all the talk shows have been wrong in assuming that the American people don't understand the difference between myth and innuendo versus hard fact, hard evidence, which has been lacking. So far, it feeds the narrative of a piling on by Republican candidates of Hillary Clinton, and it hasn't affected her.
So you say this kind of headline, National Journal's Josh Krashow with the headline, Democrats went all in on Hillary Clinton. It's looking like a terrible bet. New allegations that she did favors for foreign Clinton Foundation donors as Secretary of State. You're thinking on that? That's just sort of an inside Washington headline. That is not true. That Democrats aren't worried about. Most Democrats aren't worried about her as a candidate for 2016.
The numbers say that 9 out of 10 Democrats, 8 out of 10 Democrats strongly supporting her contradict the headline. But I'm saying more than Democrats. I'm saying Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, nationally surveyed, all voters in the New York Times CBS recent survey showed, if anything, she's gone up in belief in the strength of her leadership and in her lead in all Republicans. And the one issue that does come up that she has had a apparent impact is on the issue of trust. And yes, the pounding and pounding and pounding of innuendo, no facts, let's be clear, smoke is not the same as fire, have had an impact, and the distrust numbers have gone up. But if you compare her approval rating among all voters, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, to any Republican running for president, she is superior. You only get the headline about Hillary Clinton. The one-sidedness of the coverage doesn't mention she's actually still higher in public approval than any Republican running for president.
Let's get back to our callers. Poolsville, Maryland. John, thanks for waiting. Republican line.
Good morning, and thank you for C-SPAN. I'm glad Mr. Davis has just brought up the fact that Hillary has, in fact, gone down in the polls when it comes to trust. That was very clear in the headlines over the weekend. And I agree with you that she might have gone up in some other polls, but as far as trustworthiness, it's clear that she's down among all voters, including independents, which she's going to need if she has any chance of winning. So that's my first comment. I'm glad you finally made that point, which is a true point. Second comment is I think, you know, I see your position. You're on here to defend her. You're doing a good job of that. But, you know, with all due respect, I think you'd raise your own credibility if you can at least point out some of the things they've done wrong, at least on the appearance side. I mean, the Clintons are greedy when it comes to money, and the appearance is terrible. Even if you can't find a direct quid pro quo, I think from a credibility standpoint, you'd raise your own credibility if you could come on and admit to some of the appearance issues and some of the things that they've done wrong when it comes to raising money for the foundation.
All right, John, we'll get a response. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for being so fair, even though we disagree. And the tone of your voice, the civility, is what I look for, that we can respectfully disagree. So let me at least point out to you that the first part of what you said, the numbers have gone up on the distrust issue. After being pounded and pounded for 2 months in the headlines, that doesn't surprise me or you. But you forgot to say the second half of what I said. She's still higher in trustworthiness and approval, and I'm using the word approval because those are the numbers I've seen, than any Republican running for president, despite this 2 months of pounding. And secondly, let me also concede to you that appearances are bothersome if you are a Republican or an independent and you don't know the Clintons, but appearances are in the eye of the beholder. So let me be even-handed, which you've asked me to be. Jeb Bush is supposedly the subject of the next book by this person, Mr. Schweizer. And he has said, I see a lot of conflicts and appearance problems in Jeb Bush. Marco Rubio has been accused of conflicts. Let me say that I will be on this program defending Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, or anyone else as being honorable, decent, and honest people who should not be judged by, quote, appearances, which are in the eye of the beholder, very subjective, and rather should be judged on facts. And I do not believe that Jeb Bush ever did anything that he didn't think was the right thing to do as a result of donations, despite Mr. Schweizer's innuendo that he did. I now read about Mr. Rubio with the same accusations, all smoke, no facts. I believe he's an honorable man. I hope Republicans and Democrats will get past this subjective appearance standard, which I respect you, John, for having, and ask what are the hard facts that would accuse someone of taking a bribe. That's what Schweizer is saying he's going to accuse Jeb Bush of, and that's what I say we should not permit innuendo to be a surrogate for facts.
Mr. Davis is referring to the book by Peter Schweizer, Clinton Cash. We had the author on Washington Journal on Friday, and you can see that on our website at cspan.org. Back to the issue of the uranium company, the U.S.-based uranium company that was sold eventually, I guess, to the Russian government. I'd like you to get your response, because you made some comments about that sale. Here's what Peter Schweizer had to say. I'd like to hear what you have to say to that.
All these assets are accumulated, all this money is flowing to the Clinton Foundation, and then the Russian government arrives and says, we want to buy Uranium One because they have had a long interest in cornering the uranium market. This is a personal desire of Vladimir Putin. He actually authorizes the release of funds to buy this uranium company. In order for Russia to acquire what amounts to 20% or 25% of all the uranium assets in the United States, it requires federal government approval. There's a process called CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, that requires a number of government agencies, including the State Department, to sign off on this deal. They do sign off on the deal. What I think is troubling about Hillary Clinton in the midst of all this is that no other government agency that approves this is headed by somebody who's received $145 million to their foundation from 9 individuals connected with this firm. The second thing that's troubling is that Hillary Clinton had a history up to this point of opposing precisely these kinds of deals. In other words, where a foreign government wanted to buy a critical industry in the United States. So both of those things, I think, raise a lot of questions about what her involvement was in this.
Lanny Davis.
Look, I'll try to be less wordy than Mr. Schweizer. He ends up with everything he just said, not one fact, just suggestive associations with maybe. Well, that's not a fact. So I gave you affirmative facts he's never disputed. 9 separate federal agencies, including the Defense Department, the Treasury Department, and the State Department, whose representative said he never heard from Hillary Clinton. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission approved this transaction. The Utah Radiation Commission approved this transaction. He never says that they're in on the take, that they influenced Mrs. Clinton, who denies even being involved. In other words, the facts trump his innuendo. The facts prove that she had nothing to do with the transaction. All he does is holding up that piece of paper and says, this may be a pattern. That is not proof, and I hope he doesn't do that to Jeb Bush, because I promise I'll be back here to defend Jeb Bush on the same reason.
Let's hear from Springfield, Virginia. Tony, you're on with Lanny Davis. Good morning.
Yeah, you know, Lenny, you sound so desperate right now. You're talking about defending Jeb Bush. You talk about innuendos. You talk about jury pool. You use all these legal terms, legal terminology to confuse people. Let me tell you something. The Clintons are freaking crooks, man. A bunch of crooks. We're tired with this nonsense. That's the reason why Obama won. Okay? That's what we want. He won the first time, he's going to win again. Okay? And we'll bring somebody else, because guess what happened? Every time some controversy, they got too many problems. Everybody investigating it. Republican investigating it. This organization, money, this thing and that thing. That's the reason why we got all this problem. So it's about time for the kingdom to just disappear. All right? We're tired with this. And that's my comment.
A skeptical viewer in Springfield.
Well, it's really interesting. The emotion, I respect his emotion, and he has a right to his opinion, but his substitute for facts, hard facts that he can't disagree on, he can't challenge me on. He says I'm being legalistic when I use the word facts. Most people have common sense, what's true, what's not true. He substitutes truth and untruth for the expression frickin' crooks. Now, that's his right. He has an emotion. I respect emotion, but it has nothing to do with the truth.
Bill Clinton said recently back to the transparency issue, I think he was quoted in Town and Country in an interview that he said that our plan is to spend the whole year working on the foundation, which is by a good long stretch the most transparent of all the presidential foundations and more transparent than a lot of other major foundations in the country. Is he pretty much on target in terms of the transparency, comparing the Clinton Foundation to similar foundations?
Well, one of the rating agencies for charities, I think it's called Charity Works, I'm not sure of the name, has ranked the Clinton Foundation as one of the most transparent. I think most people would acknowledge the truth of that, except people with a partisan motive or edge. But let me just at least, if we're running out of time, please remember all the good works. Bill Clinton has been on his hands and knees in the middle of Africa. I listened to him spellbound one night at a foundation dinner where he described being exhilarated, that's the word Bill Clinton used, when he was on his knees with an old woman farmer in the middle of Africa planting seeds. This is a man who could be retired somewhere relaxing with a quintuple bypass, who left his presidency with a 65% approval rating, could have rested on his laurels. Ronald Reagan received $1 million fee for a speaking fee in Japan. Nothing wrong with that. All ex-presidents receive a lot of money for speaking fees. Bill Clinton is working his tail off all over the globe, including in America, for people, children, people in need. Whatever the politics are, let's remember the good works that Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton have done for people all over the globe. And if I might end on a purple note here, red and blue combining into purple, this is one thing everyone agrees with, the good works of the foundation. You'd never know it from the newspaper headlines that are focusing on the smoke and the innuendo, but I would love to see the New York Times, the Washington Post, my two favorite newspapers, I greatly respect both of them, to do in-depth research on what the Clinton Foundation is doing to help people in this country and all over the world.
Well, let's hear from Paola, Pennsylvania. Marie is on our Democrats line.
Hello. I'd like to say I'm sick of the mean-spirited attacks on Hillary Clinton, who is an honorable politician that I support for president. I think voters need to see through those attacks and elect a Democratic Congress that will cooperate with her, because everyone can see that a president without the support of Congress can't get much done. And Hillary Clinton and her campaign need to repeat over and over again that she needs to go into office with a supportive Democratic Congress.
Okay, Marie in Pennsylvania. Here's Collins, Texas, Collins, Mississippi, and James is on our independent line.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to say this. Just give me a little bit of time. It's a sad day in America when you see this country going down with ISIS and all these things. Now they're going to attack Miss Clinton. And when the Iraq War started out, 9/11 started out, all those investigations, all those VICs, I didn't hear the Republican Party talking about this kind of stuff. When President Bush was reelected, the Speaker, the House Speaker for the President wrote a book, and they took him in front of the Congress, and the Senator ISIS asked this Speaker that wrote the book about President Bush, why did you write this book? Do you know this is damaging to him? You should have took this to your grave. Go back and look at it on C-SPAN. C-SPAN, you showed the man come on there and talk about what went on in President Bush's administration, and they covered it up. ISIS, and I'm a Republican, so it's sad when you have the woman running for president that all of a sudden all the laundry coming out on him. But what about all the other candidates running? I mean, just because they wasn't president or winning their senators, let's look at all the contributions that they get with lobbyists and all those connections. There's a lot of hypocrisy going on with the media too, because the media does not inspect or either challenge these people. It's a sad day, but you know what? I put my trust in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I know that the truth is going to come out, because why they're so afraid of Hillary being president.
All right, James, appreciate your input. Any thoughts there?
I'd like to go back to the earlier call and certainly respect this man's sincerity, but the earlier caller, Democratic female, urged people to vote for Hillary for president. Thank you for that. and a Democratic Congress. I'd love to see a Democratic Congress, but my instincts tell me that we have a government that works best when it's bipartisan. And I know that Hillary Clinton, when she was a U.S. Senator, was close friends with a number of Republicans and worked with a number of Republicans. She was called by Senator Bob Byrd of West Virginia a workhorse, not a show horse. I know Senator John McCain, Senator Lindsey Graham, and many others in the Republican Senate worked with Senator Clinton and came to respect her, even though they had differences of opinion. So if Hillary Clinton is president of the United States, and I believe that word is when, because she is the most qualified and certainly the best person and character that I have met in public service in many years, when she is president, you can be assured if there is a Republican Congress, she will be a bipartisan and I use the word purple to indicate the word bipartisan president who will work for solutions driven by facts, not ideology.
Back to calls to Houston, Texas. We hear from Mike on our Republican line.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Davis, you seem like a very nice person.
Thank you.
I can tell you that personally, Hillary Clinton could not possibly be less transparent. When Governor Christie took questions on Bridgegate, he took questions until there were no more questions. Hillary has taken 2 questions in over a month. She is letting everybody like you take the questions and defending her, and she runs around and navigates through like O.J. Simpson with a football and never takes questions, okay? Second point, the server, this is all about the server. So I invite any Democrats to call and tell me the transparency that would be confirmed if Hillary releases the server to a neutral party as requested by Republicans. This would set her free. This would validate her transparency and show the you know, the thing of it is, here you have Washington, D.C., surrounded by 7 of the top 10 wealthiest counties in America. 7 of the top 10. What? And now Hillary's making all this, getting all this money through the foundation. Nothing's changing there. So when the guy called and said there are a bunch of crooks, he's getting at the point that there's too much underhanded stuff going on, and the people who had 1 vote, they just don't have any impact.
All right, Mike, we'll hear a response, and I'll just to follow on his comment. The State Department did release a statement in terms of the use of the personal email by Hillary Clinton, which read in part, I think that the action we've taken in the course of recovering the emails has made it very clear that what people's responsibilities are with respect to record keeping. I think the message is loud and clear that that is not acceptable in terms of the use of the private server. Mr. Davis.
Well, first of all, thank you for thinking I'm a nice person. I'd like to also be, in your mind, a fair person, and you're entitled to your opinion on whether Hillary Clinton has been transparent enough. I would ask you, as much as you have a strong point of view, and I respect that, to apply the same standard if you're going to be fair. So Colin Powell used the same device for both official and personal emails. He never revealed his personal emails, nor actually explained why he mixed business and personal. Yet you did not mention General Colin Powell, an extremely honorable man, so I have no criticism for what he did. I'm just saying you're using a double standard. And let's talk about Jeb Bush, who I've described as honorable, decent, and who I will defend against the innuendo that Mr. Schweizer has used against the Clintons if he goes forward as he says he will. Let's look at what Governor Bush did as a governor, yet you didn't mention him. And that may reflect your bias or your double standard, or maybe you just forgot. He had 500,000 emails over 8 years, and I believe that number is right, on his own server. He separated out official business and published. He retained personal business. And you didn't mention that. His server, personal business. No different than Mrs. Clinton. Finally, let me suggest to you that you look at the law. The leading lawyer at the Archives Administration, the one quoted in the first New York Times story, that this was highly unusual, was asked by Michael Smerconish on CNN, did Hillary Clinton do anything illegal, violate any rule? The word rule is sometimes thrown out as something else. Did she do anything illegal or violate any rule? That lawyer said no. That is a fact. What she did was legal, ethical, and retaining personal private emails, the right to privacy. Every member of Congress, every Republican presidential candidate has personal email that they do not disclose. And in the case of Governor Bush, a server that you haven't asked be scrubbed, and I don't ask should be scrubbed. He has a right to his privacy.
A couple more comments or questions back to the foundation on Twitter. This is from H. Robert, who says, isn't it laudable that the Clintons help people around the world rather than amassing a fortune for themselves like the Bushes? And a question, I don't know if you can answer this, from Dee Dee, who says, do at least half the funds raised by the foundation go to support U.S. causes?
Yes, approximately one half, but I resent and disagree with all due respect to your innuendo about the Bushes. President Bush 41, President Bush 43 have done immense good works all over the world, contributed to charities. If you're a partisan Democrat, don't go there. Don't use innuendo against the Bushes or other Republicans, which is what we're being subjected to. Stay on the facts and be fair.
Here's our Democrats line to Hertford, North Carolina. Beverly, go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm just so glad to see this gentleman on TV telling the truth.
Thank you.
Dealing with facts, not opinions. Now, I'm just very proud of Hillary Clinton and her foundation. It helps people, and it's open and transparent. If it wasn't, we wouldn't know the money. We wouldn't be talking about the money that is in the foundation. However, with Citizens United, we can't say the same thing about Congress. They have the lobbyists coming up there giving them money to promote things that they want. Nobody's saying anything about that. I've never seen a congressman come in to, I'll say, leave out of Congress, out of his term, poor. They all leave out millionaires. Do we ever wonder about that? Let's just stop about Hillary. The Republicans are afraid of her. They're afraid. You have a good day.
Thank you, Beverly. Do you think she said the Republicans are afraid? Do you agree?
There's no question. If they weren't afraid of Hillary Clinton running for president and actually winning the presidency, every single Republican candidate went to a conference here in Washington. Did one of them talk about their ideas for solving the country, for defeating terrorism, for actually being constructive and operating in a bipartisan fashion? No. What did they do? What's their big idea? Bash Hillary Clinton. It's almost comical. You have somebody named Carly Fiorina, who was fired by Hewlett-Packard, who is rejected by California's voters, who has nothing to say other than the female bashing Hillary Clinton. I say female because she's the one female running, and she thinks it's her role to bash Hillary Clinton. None of them tell us what they stand for because they're afraid of running against Hillary Clinton.
Staying on the campaign for a second, a front page story in the Washington Post about the role of Bill Clinton. Finding a role for the other Clinton is the jump page headline of the story. And they write that in a presidential race that could include 24 candidates, none has a spouse like Bill Clinton, a former president whose sprawling charitable ventures are rife with potential conflicts of interest, an admired public figure whose common touch propelled his rise, but who now charges up to $500,000 to give a speech. A curious ideas man whose penchant for speaking his mind drives news cycles, and a globe-trotting icon whose recognizable tuft of white hair draws onlookers everywhere, from his old Arkansas haunts to the bustling souks around Marrakesh's Central Square. Where's that role for Bill Clinton, in or out of the campaign?
First of all, there's no question this is a fact. If not one of the most popular human beings, men or women, in any profession on the planet, in every country polled, is William Jefferson Clinton. Why? Because he could be relaxing and enjoying a post-presidency after a quintuple bypass. Instead, he's all over the world, working his butt off, especially in the United States and abroad, to help people. So that's number one. Secondly, did you notice a reporter I actually respect because he went to a certain institution named Yale and worked for a certain newspaper called the Yale Daily News. I won't mention his name. Do you notice that he used the expression potential conflict of interest? Not conflict of interest, potential, maybe, could be, smoke, innuendo. This is what we're up against when you're talking about the Clintons.
But do you think it's a reporter's job to point out a potential conflict of interest there?
The answer is reporters used to, in journalism school, say, what's the facts, what aren't the facts? If they want someone to use the word potential, they get a quote, because I don't know what the word potential means. It could be from 1 to 1,000. Most reporters nowadays, with all due respect, do exactly what this reporter does. They use subjective words that are their own words. They're not facts. They're adjectives. They're characterizations. But let's just look at what the word potential means. There's no fact there. It's all in the eye of the beholder. I see no conflict of interest until you show me a fact where anything Bill Clinton has done has influenced his wife as Secretary of State on a policy. Not one fact. I challenge anyone. Mr. Schweizer admits he doesn't have one. There isn't one.
Let's hear from Bill, who's in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Good morning. Hello, Bill.
Lanny, you are making some very right statements, but what difference does it make? We've just got 4 dead heroes because we're making the remark stand down along with the video. And you've got to where you've lied so much you can look right straight into the camera and have no problem with lying. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have no idea what you just said.
I think he was talking a bit about the stand-down order on Benghazi. How do you think she has, that's another issue entirely, but how do you think she has...
Stand-down order on Benghazi. So the gentleman uses the word lying. It's a strong word. Give me a fact. The fact is that every Republican committee, the Intelligence Committee, the Armed Services Committee, in the House of Representatives, denied what you just said. The stand-down order was not Hillary Clinton's order. The stand-down order was made in the context of not being able to deliver. The Department of Defense says this. The Secretary of Defense says this. The Armed Services responsible say this. We're not in a position to deliver people in time to rescue those poor people. So when you use the word lying, or everybody out there watching, have a fact behind lying, because that's a strong word. And you can't name a fact. I just gave you facts from Republicans that contradict your assertion.
Here's Charlotte, North Carolina. Darwin on our Democrats line. Morning.
Thank you. Look, man, I am a Democrat. I register folks to vote in Charlotte for Barack. But this Hillary stuff that Lanny and the rest of these people trying to force down our throat is not right. She's not a good candidate, and I'm not going to go with the Republican with Benghazi because those are all hearsay. A couple of facts. She scraped her server because information was there that was being investigated. You telling us that you making us seem like we are stupid. Democrats are stupid. You telling us that Bill Clinton speaking to a foreign leader in reference to security affairs is not going to be discussed in the Clinton household? Man, leaning are the folks that make lawyer look bad. And I'm in the legal field. She's not right for Democrat, and I'm going to fight her till we get a right candidate. And then, if she wins the primary, I'm going to vote for her in the general, because I can vote for a Republican. I would never do that.
We'll get a response. Darwin, thank you.
Look, I respect your doubts. I respect your opinion. I hope that Hillary Clinton, on the issues that you really care about, will fight for your issues. That's all she's talking about. To answer an earlier question, why doesn't she become more out there on the issue of emails and Clinton Foundation, potential conflicts and all those things? That could be her full-time job, answering everybody's innuendo. She's focused on issues that you should care about: jobs, your family, education, our international security. That's what you will, I think, end up supporting her about. If you have concerns about her behavior, her conduct, I respect your opinion on that. But I do also appreciate your saying that if she's nominated, you'll support her, and thank you for that.
To New York City, next up, this is Paul, Independence Line.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I think there's a big problem here, and I think the big problem is that Ms. Clinton is out of touch with average Americans. I don't think she, I mean, when's the last time she's flown commercial? When's the last time she's taken public transportation or parked her own car? You know, this example of extreme wealth that you, Mr. Davis, and the Clintons and the Bushes and all your friends there in Washington have, compared to the rest of America, is kind of extreme. Colin Powell didn't run for president, as I understand it. I don't know why you want to make the comparison with him. She's running for president. And this out-of-touch super wealth, extreme wealth, that you and your ilk make in Washington from quote-unquote public service when it's really private gain is kind of incredible. Who else in America makes this kind of money? I mean, it's outrageous, quite frankly. And I think it's time that we have somebody who actually drives their own car, maybe, buys their own groceries. Somebody who's actually flown coach in the last 10 years.
Okay, Paul.
Look, I understand you're very angry, and using the word ilk and outrageous suggests genuine emotions of anger, and I just have to respect your emotions, but let me remind you at least to try to be fair. Franklin Roosevelt, John Kennedy, Ronald Reagan are three examples of presidents who had great wealth and yet had the common touch because they understood Ronald Reagan, Franklin Roosevelt for sure. And John Kennedy was accused of being too wealthy and out of touch, and he went to West Virginia, one of the poorest states in the country, and he won the West Virginia primary. So Hillary Clinton, for goodness sakes, and Bill Clinton came from Hillary Clinton from a middle-class background, Bill Clinton probably from a little bit less than that, but they've worked hard all their lives, and whatever wealth they have, the American people in every poll, you're in a minority, say that Hillary Clinton cares about issues that I care about and that they relate to her because of that. So with all due respect, I respect your opinion. You're in a very small minority when you say Hillary Clinton is out of touch.
You've mentioned the Bushes a couple of times. You served briefly in the Civil Liberties and Privacy Oversight Board
for President Bush.
For
yes.
President
President George W.
Bush.
And in full disclosure, we were in college together. We were in fraternities together. I never voted for him for president. I did support him as president of my fraternity. He's a very decent and honorable man. And I happen to know that President Clinton and President Bush respect each other greatly. And I happen to know that President Clinton loves almost like a second father, President Bush, 41.
Well, just a quick take, a 30-second take from you on the privacy issue that's coming up in terms of the bulk data collection and
Yes.
as the Patriot Act comes up for renewal. Where do you stand on that?
Very quickly, I support the NSA's mission to prevent another 9/11. I think there's an overbroad net that needs to be narrowed, and the court's decision was not about the Fourth Amendment. Let me say that again. The court's decision never said what the NSA has done in gathering this metadata, no content, no listening in on conversations, just indescribable and inexplicable to me data that's on emails or on telephone calls, rather, is what was at issue. The court said Congress never intended the net to be so broad. Congress needs to narrow that net. When there's an evil terrorist who contacts somebody in the United States, they can follow that chain, and now they go to telephone companies under the court's decision rather than the NSA. Congress needs to fix it, but let's repeat. With all the Snowden rhetoric about Fourth Amendment, this court never said that the Patriot Act in this respect was unconstitutional and was inconsistent with the Fourth Amendment. That was not the decision. It's a matter of statutory mandate which needs to be corrected.
Two more quick calls here. Fred's first in Cordova, Maryland, on our Republican line.
Hello, C-SPAN. I would like to thank you for creating an excellent format here. And I think Mr. Schweitzer and Mr. Davis should both be commended for their participation. This is how democracy really works well.
Thank you.
In this country. My biggest concern here, and I could certainly be wrong, is we have the Republican governor in jail over what at least appears to me to be circumstantial evidence, and the Democratic senator being indicted over what appears to be circumstantial evidence. And if you could explain to me how what appears to be circumstantial evidence regarding the Clinton Foundation is any different. They all seem to be in the same ballpark to me. So
you're talking about Governor McDonald from Virginia, right?
And Senator Menendez.
And Senator Menendez from... Okay, Fred, thank you.
Well, thanks. It's a great question. and I don't want to be too lawyerly here. I was already accused of being a lawyer by somebody else. Circumstantial evidence, you're absolutely right, are facts that lead to an inference. But if there are alternative facts that contradict that inference, it's no longer viable for a conclusion. In the case of the uranium mine, in every other instance in that book, the facts contradict the inference that Hillary Clinton took a bribe. For example, 9 agencies, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Utah Radiation Commission, all of these independent entities approving this sale of this mine to the Russians contradict the inference that Hillary Clinton took a bribe. But in the case of Governor McDonnell, in the case of Senator Menendez, who is an innocent man, indictment is a ham sandwich, a one-sided presentation to a grand jury. Let's wait for the trial on Senator Menendez under the presumption of innocence. I have signed on to an amicus brief suggesting that Governor McDonnell was convicted based upon an erroneous instruction to the jury that said, if somebody takes something in value in return for an official act that the official would have done regardless of the money, then I say that's going way too broad, criminalizing politics, not criminal intent. But I respect the jury system. I disagreed with the judge's instruction and joined other White House counsel, including Ted Olson and other Republican White House counsel, in an amicus brief suggesting that the judge's instruction to the jury was so broad that somebody standing online to get a photograph with the President of the United States, who happened to give that president a campaign donation, could be indicted for a crime under that instruction.
Just so happens our last caller is from Virginia. This is Kobina on our Democrats line.
Hey, good morning. How you guys doing?
Fine, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to put on record that I'm going to buy the order, his book. I'm going to buy it and read it. I listened to him last Friday, and I was very worried. You know, Mrs. Hillary Clinton is a strong lady, and I support her for president. And I believe she's going to get the nomination. But we have to be worried because we are all human beings. And Mrs. Hillary Clinton is also a human being, and there is a potential, as she's been saying, for her.
Okay, Kobina, how does she address those worried viewers?
Thank you. Thank you for being worried. I can assure you that if you look at the current polls, the American people have allowed the innuendo and smoke to pass them by. Only the pundits in Washington are always talking about how negative this is for Hillary Clinton. Yes, there's a short-term impact we discussed, but don't be worried. Ultimately, people vote on issues they care about. And the polls show that Hillary Clinton is right on those issues and that they think she cares about them, in contrast to Republicans who are wrong on most of those issues and who are seen as not caring about issues that most everyday Americans care about. So I honor and respect your worry, but she will be our next president because the American people use common sense and they know the difference between smoke and fire, innuendo and the truth.
And friend and associate, former White House Special Counsel Lanny Davis, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Washington Journal continues momentarily. We're going to take a look at evangelicals in the 2016 campaign. We're joined by Dr. Russell Moore of the Southern Baptist Convention. What evangelicals are looking for in the 2016 race. And later on, Tom Martin, who is CEO of the American Forest Foundation, on the financial and material resources needed to suppress forest fires across the U.S. Last year, about $1.5 billion were spent suppressing forest fires in the U.S. Washington Journal continues.